What's up guys, Max here and welcome back to my dungeon. Today I'm going to play a bit with this budget build. I'm going to change components and there's a lot of actual real footage of the gameplay, so you can decide for yourself if it's worth going with a certain path or another. The starting point of our system is our trusted B450M-A Pro Max from MSI, a very nice motherboard, a kit of Ballistic, the 3200 MHz C16 that is tuned to 3200 MHz C14 with tight subtiming, so a very nice tuning straight from the RAM calculator, so very easy to obtain, and the GTX 1660 Super, and that is another very nice GPU for 1080p. And well, now it's hard to find, I know, but if you have that already or a similar GPU, you can compare. And for the CPU, we have a Ryzen 5 1600AF, so it's like a 2600 but with another name. Basically, is another very nice CPU for the price, and well, we are going to swap it with a Ryzen 3 5600X. For the GPU, we have a Radeon 5700 XT. This is the 15th anniversary edition, but this is like a mid-tier GPU, so not super expensive, but it can really play nice at 1440p, because 1440p 144 Hz is our goal for today, since now this type of monitor are becoming more and more affordable, and if you want to upgrade your system, you need to be ready for that type of resolution and refresh rate. So now what you're going to do is to prepare this system to be ready for that change. But anyway, don't skip any part. I will cut the boring part for you. There's a lot of comment that I suggest you to listen. And now it's time for some action. Let's take a look at this zone. Here I am at, let's say, an emulation of 1080p, quality 7. The CPU is at default. And if I'm questing in this zone, so Ardenveld, and yes, I have 115, so 120, something like this. But if I turn around, look at my FPS that goes into the 80s, and it's not good at all. Now, if I turn again, even if I'm fighting, I'm 115. I look at this way, 78. So this zone is one of the most intensive for the GPU in this game, even compared to the right. So let's play a bit with the effect and resolution. So as you can see, I'm CPU bound, heavily CPU bound. So if I go all the way down to quality 1, now I can finally reach my objective, that is 144 Hz. But well, I'm not quality 1. So even if I look here, but well, as you can see, the quality is pretty bad. So let's try quality 10, because if you want to enjoy the game, at least I like to play at quality 10. In this case we have a 60 FPS on the bad side and 90 FPS, 95 in the good side. But what happens if I want to run this at the new monitor resolution, so 1440p quality 10? As you can see, the FPS didn't dip too much. We're at 51 FPS. Well, it's not enough to have a good and smooth gameplay, but well, still playable. Because if I look at this side, I'm at 80 FPS. And let's try now at quality 7. Quality 7 is not too far from before. We are still at 99 FPS, our CPU is fine, and I have 90 and 67. Okay, now I have changed the GPU with the RX 5700 XT, and well, same settings, roughly 1080p, quality 10, and now this time we have 100 FPS, before it was like 60, so we have a big change for this particular zone. Looking at this way, what happens if I look at this side? we are topping at 125, 129 FPS. And now we have the GPU that is not bound anymore. So we have a CPU issue now. Well, issue. It's the CPU that cannot supply all the frames. And now again 90 FPS. And as you can see, the GPU is spiking again to 98 or let's say 100%. So since now we are into the GPU limited territory. So more or less, even if I play in a zone, in a specific zone that is not GPU bound, we cannot reach our 144 FPS since we have the CPU that, as you can see here, is spiking 100%. So we are CPU limited. Now what I'm going to do is to overclock a bit the CPU to see if we have any kind of improvement. Now the CPU is at 4 GHz and I can do even 4.1, but let's say 4 GHz since not every 1600 AF can do that. So let's say 4 GHz is a 300 MHz bump, and yeah, we have more or less the same result as before since it's not enough. It's not the frequency that change a lot, but it's the architecture itself of the CPU that make the difference. So in the bad zone we are still having 90 FPS, and in the good zone we are still topping at 120 or something like this. What happens now if I switch to full 1440p quality 10? Again, no difference at all since I'm still heavily CPU bound. Even if I raise the resolution, at least now the GPU is roughly at 100%. So we raise the resolution, but still we lost 5 FPS. And here again 74, 72. So now looking at this way, we are GPU limited since this zone is just bad. There's a lot of effects, but I think it is a really bad zone that cannot allows us to play nicely since in other zone with this GPU and this CPU I can run max out at 1440p and 144 FPS. Now I am in Oribos, and once again we have our GPU that is sitting at 60% and our CPU that is spiking to 100%. So we cannot reach 144 Hz with this CPU. No matter what we try, we can even put on 3090, but we are still limited by the CPU. So what I'm going to do now is to show you the zone that are most likely to be CPU limited to see the difference. Now I just entered the BG. So we are an Epic BG, 40 people, and it's clear that the CPU here is struggling a lot since our GPU is at 64-65%, and even with the 1660 Super, I was able to run with the settings, so 1080p, 1440p, quality 10. Since the GPU is doing basically nothing, and this CPU is spiking at 90%, 100%, and we are dipping into the 70 for the 1% and 28 in the 0.1% lows. But let's play a bit and see how this rig will do in a 40 man. Take a look now. With a lot of spell, our GPU is still doing basically nothing. So it's not an issue of GPU, but it's still an issue of CPU. Let's try to add some more spell, if I can. So take a look at this now. So 60% of 40% of the GPU and CPU is spiking at 100%. Take a look at this. So even the Battleground is very CPU intensive. We have a lot of effects on screen, but still I'm unable to play smooth as I can, at least if I have a 144 Hz display, I'm expecting to play at that frequency, but I can't. Now, with the new CPU that is tuned to the limit of the fabric clock and with tight subtiming, so a full manual configuration, we are now finally at 144 Hz, and well, look at this. 1440p, quality 10, everything maxed out. Of course, here I have my limiter at 144 FPS to emulate our monitor, and well, the game is butterly smooth. Look at that. Look at this. So we have the GPU that is still doing almost nothing, 50%, 60%, but at least look at the 1% lows, the 0.1% lows. We are just doing perfect. Alright, so we are again in our nasty zone in Ardenweald, and even with the new CPU, we still are topping at 115 FPS, since again, we are at 99% of GPU. And here I am at 1440p, quality 10. Same thing as before. If I look at this way, we have 70 FPS. So in this zone really doesn't matter the CPU you're running, and the GPU will be stressed out. But what happens if I lower the quality to 7? And now we have 140 FPS. That was impossible with the previous CPU because it was heavy limiting our GPU. And now I'm still at 98%, but with higher frame rate. If I look at this side, again 95, since again is a super GPU limited, well probably is bugged more than GPU limited, but anyway, at least we can almost maxed out our graphics card. But let's see this configuration in the BG. Alright, so same Battleground, 1440p, quality at 10, everything maxed out, our limiter 144 FPS, and as you can see the GPU is at 85%. Now we are going to go into the middle of the battle and see how it behaves. Now, a lot of people, now we will see a lot of spell, but so far, let me reset the counter here. So far we're doing much better than before. The game is super smooth. We are almost between 110 and 144. This is going to get very CPU limited, and you will see even the GPU dropping down. And it's safe to say that this GPU is overkill for Battleground at 1440p 144 Hz. Look at this. At least now we have 60 FPS, stable condition. Don't die. Don't die. So a lot of people, and yes, 60 FPS, but the game is still playable. Before it was hard. Now at least I can go into the middle of the battle and see exactly what is happening. I can react. Well, I'm playing really bad in this video since I have to talk to you. So I hope that my fellow players don't mind if I'm a bit distracted. So now that we have a bit of less people, the frame rate are going to go high again. So even now with a big fight, check the FPS, we have won with an average of 116 FPS, 59 1% low and 48.1% low. Our GPU was doing 58%, 60, 70, sometimes 99, but well, it's safe to say that to play in a BG we don't need much GPU power. In fact, now we are going to change it. And now with our old GPU, the 1660 Super, I'm not capping my display refresh rate, but almost. And I'm running at 99% of my GPU. And I'm 131, 32, sometimes I can even go at 144. But the main thing is, with a lot of people you see here, I'm still running perfectly smooth. So at the end, if I have a variable refresh rate, I don't really care if I lose 10 FPS sometimes, even 20. But look at the minimum. The game is just doing perfect. But let's get to Ardenweld in our worst spot, and we see the difference now. And we are back again in our worst spot ever. So we have 77, 76 FPS in our best looking point, and turning like this, 56, 55. But well, still around 60 FPS. You can play with that. And you are 1440p, quality 10. Let's go a bit down, and we have 94, 95, and yes, 67, 70. 1440p, quality 7. Let's go down a bit with resolution to emulate a 1440p monitor, and still we have 82 and 115. So again, it's all on the GPU. The CPU is limited by the GPU, but at least I can play well in many scenarios. And now let's do again our Battleground. So here we are again in our Battleground, same configuration as before, 1440p, quality 10, everything maxed out, and we are ready to start the battle. Big fight, we got 60 FPS, more or less. The GPU is now stressed, so we are not bottlenecked by the CPU this time. And yes, we have 50, 40, so we are struggling a bit in big battles like this. But still, I can play very well, and if I want, I can drop down the resolution. Something that I cannot do with the CPU if I need more power. In the next battle I will try to lower a bit the resolution and see what happens. Good. It seems we have won again this little fight. And as you can see, we have 100, more than 100 FPS now without the people, and we are still maxing out our GPU. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to try to lower a bit at 47 the details. And now we are maxing out our frame rate. But the question is if we can hold another big battle like that. Let's reset the counter so we can have an idea of what's going on here. I'm going to finish now this BG, and if we have a big fight, we can comment on that, or you will see the average results at the end. I will probably at the battle for the keep at the end. I will stop the game, and we can comment about that. So here we are in a big fight, a lot of spell, and we are holding 130 FPS. So the new CPU definitely helped a lot. I'm quality 7, not maxed out, but still, now we can play pretty nicely. Look at this FPS here or here, 130, 120, a lot of spell, a lot of people, but I can fight without any issue, and well, we got a victory. Alright guys, I think now you have a better idea what happens if you change a component or another. In my opinion, since World of Warcraft, as you may know, is a very CPU hungry game, the first thing to do is go with a Ryzen 3. As well, you can do with Ryzen 2 to have a slightly better performance, but you will not be able to attain the numbers that I show you today. So if you want to plan an upgrade path, go first with a Ryzen 3. In this case, with a budget build, a Ryzen 5 5600X is more than enough for everything. And then when you have the budget, you can try to find some GPU. I know it's hard, but if you have like a 1660 Super or something like that, my suggestion is to wait a bit and, well, play with a slightly less resolution, or you can lower the detail and hold on until the GPU market is more stable. But with the GPU, with the CPU change, this is something that, as you just saw, means a lot for your gameplay. And for today, this is everything I had for you. But now I'm going to play a bit with this Peltier cell. This is a very big one, 450 watts, and I'm going to do some crazy experiments. So don't forget to subscribe and see you in the next one.